So what is Happy Valley?
It's a place in New York.
When did you first hear about it?
Oh, well, are we off script now?
We can be. I mean, it's no biggie. Well, welcome to Unearthly Upstate. I'm Mari Manette.
I'm Matthew Manette.
And today we're going to be discussing Happy Valley. Happy Valley. We haven't left the Syracuse region. If any of you have listened to our soft episodes or kind of practiced episodes, this is our first official episode, so happy May Day. That's the day we plan to have it out.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So Happy Valley is north of Syracuse. It's in Oswego County.
On the eastern side of Oswego County.
Yes. And it's got an interesting history. So I'm going to read a little bit of what I put together in my report. As Matt said, it's on the eastern side of Oswego County. There's 9,000-acre parcel of land that is now a New York State wildlife management area. The wildlife area sits in the towns of Albion, Amboy, Williamstown, and Parrish. During the winter, due to the fact that the wildlife area sits in a prime location for lake effect snow, the snowfall can average about 125 inches. For those of you who don't live in New York, this part of New York
State, a lot of snow.
Yeah, it's very common to measure your snowfall in feet and not inches. Just an aside, I think it was our third year here. We were from northwestern Wisconsin, so we're used to harsh winters.
Just a lot of harsh winters. A lot of weeks of nothing but below zero weather.
But we got our first one where we literally had 4 feet dumped on us within a week. So if you don't like a lot of snow, I would recommend not coming to this part of central New York. Okay?
And guess what? If you don't like the weather in central New York, wait 15 minutes.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Anyway,
it'll change.
That was a nice little aside. But the wildlife management area is a great place for hunting, fishing, and trapping. And the new growth forest offers shelter and habitat for animals that live there. The forest is now new growth because prior to 1930s, Happy Valley was a farming community. The land had been cleared and the farmsteads grew hops. And they filled the area starting in 1820. But something happened in the 1930s that caused the village to be abandoned and its buildings left to be taken over by the forest. Ask anyone who's been to Happy Valley or at least heard of it. You might hear tales of a town wiped out by plague or tales of a village that just disappeared one night. Was it a sudden influx of evil, a sickness, a curse, or something else? There is a lot of interesting tales that come out of this. I heard one, the first time I heard about it, I was working for a big box store. And one of my coworkers had pictures that she had taken. Her family were camping there, having a little get together. And these, this is old school pictures. These are ones you physically had to hold in your hand. So they weren't like, she wasn't showing me on her camera phone because camera phones at that time were either priced out of them or were not existent. I think my little flip phone had a little camera, but you wouldn't take much with it. No, these were 35 millimeter prints. All right. And she was showing pictures of what they're camping in Happy Valley. You can camp there. It's a primitive campsite. But her family had done it before, so it wasn't a big deal. And they had the fire going, really not, your typical family gathered around the campfire, drinking beer or whatever. And she said, she pointed out these particular photos, which were of a pregnant relative of hers, and it looked like these orbs were surrounding her belly.
Oh, all right.
And that's the first time I heard of Happy Valley, because she said, I never believed the ghost stories until I took these pictures.
Now, would that count as will-o-wisps?
There were orbs.
Oh, okay.
If you watch any paranormal things, there's orbs.
Oh, okay. All right, then.
Like,
I had here about the ghost. Perhaps that would be the time to introduce it. Yeah.
Well, that was the first time I heard of it, but I've read I found other tales. I mean, some people talk about they're going out there camping and they'll come across people in white or black hoods doing some nefarious deed out in the woods.
Okay, that can't be good.
And then there's this great story I read somewhere about this guy and his friend were going out there camping, and they stumbled upon these two older dudes who were just sitting at this campfire and just stared at the young guys for like an hour.
Yes, people drinking odd concoctions.
Yeah.
Glowing eyes, the feeling that something is not right in the woods. I think I've been to that party.
On hauntedplaces.org, you can find personal accounts of the hauntings at Happy Valley. This one struck me out because you want to talk about a tall tale.
You mean the tales surrounding the schoolhouse?
Yes. This is in the comment section. The guy or gal used the name Caretaker. September 27th, 2005. Why has there been a cover-up to all the skeleton remains found in the ashes of the schoolhouse? It has been determined that there were remains of 3 school-aged children that had disappeared in 1878 and presumed drowned and washed out to Lake Ontario. Bodies were never recovered, and information based on a witness claimed to see the falling children in the current east of Pulaski. The same witness with ties to Happy Valley area and the schoolhouse. The prominent name of the town official over 100 years ago is still being covered up. Anyone need not to wonder why Happy Valley is haunted, especially since the schoolhouse in the cemetery area. Okay.
They need to put this. Oh, okay. First of all, you're dealing with someone who doesn't know what a spell checker is.
Yeah, I tried to read it phonetically, folks. But anyway, first of all, my biggest qualm with this is, in our research, we've heard this story before.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
This is actually a common story. Children killed in the schoolhouse, and then there's this huge cover-up. It didn't happen. Second of all, unless they took the bodies over to the canal that connects Oswego,
it just gets better,
to the barge canal, there's no way they can just wash out to Lake Ontario. That is really the only direct connection, and Happy Valley is nowhere near that. Okay, if you're going to dump bodies in any lake, you'd actually dump them in Oneida. This is so disrespectful. I know, we're laughing, but you dump them in Oneida, and they would be in Oneida Lake. Okay, maybe somehow would get washed up through connecting through the two canals up to Lake Ontario, but there's no way that could physically happen. Are you okay?
Turning 3 shades of red over here. Keep it in.
I mean, it's a great story, but really?
Just
really?
That account is really sort of, well, it's a typical account of what happened at the schoolhouse and how this brutal school teacher snapped one fine day, you know. And
I hate to break it to Caretaker here, that exact same story is told down in Bigmanton.
Yeah, it is.
And the fact that it's a schoolhouse, and in that case, the cemetery is next to it, and it's a burned-down schoolhouse in Bigmanton. Here's the cemetery next to it, and guess what? These children were brutally murdered and buried in the cemetery. I mean, this one goes one step further, said they were brutally murdered and then dumped in some waterway that took them straight to Lake Ontario, which, if you knew if you get a map out, it ain't going to happen unless they drove all the way over to like Fulton or Phoenix and dumped the body in the canal. That is the only way. The only way.
In other words, it's going to be a lot of work, folks, to get rid of those bodies.
Yes. And I could even probably find the name of that town official because I just went through the roles of the town officials. So.
Yes, absolutely.
But that is one of the more outrageous stories that you hear about Happy Valley.
Absolutely,
yeah. But all the tales talk about this abandoned village. The village was left to rot in the middle of the forest. It has become the focal point of these tales, especially the cemetery and the old schoolhouse. The cemetery dates to 1866, and the schoolhouse was built in 1867. There are other foundation and remains of farmhouses that used to be there. So what happened in this little village called Happy Valley, or prior to that, Fraser?
Oh, Fraser.
Fraser, thank you. Correct my German. All right. Well...
Sorry. And you were the one who took German.
Yes. It's actually... They got hit by a trifecta of 3 things that happened.
Yeah, they happened one right after the other.
The village was hit by 3 events that they really had no control over. And these events were known as Prohibition, the Great Depression, and the Dust Bowl. First of all, these were hop farmers. And... well, what was banned during Prohibition?
Drink.
Alcohol.
Yes, and they provided hops. They grew hops for local breweries.
Yes.
But by the time the Prohibition was taken out of law, the hops farmers, they found that economic recovery in hop farming was unrealistic.
So you've got these farmers already scrapping out an existence out there. Their livelihood's taken away due to Prohibition because nothing else uses hops. No. Okay.
Yep.
It wasn't like, the wheat farmers and there are other grains. Other grains can be used in other things, not just alcohol. Hops is pretty much stuck with beer. I mean, So, but there was nothing else in that community.
Yeah, they were left with no hop production.
Yeah.
And lacking any other sort of industry. The support for the communities just kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
The Great Depression arrived.
Yep, the Great Depression, and it started to really do the death blow to Happy Valley.
Yep.
So, for a little refresher, for those who don't know, the Great Depression started with the stock market crash on October 29th, 1929. And then in the 1930s, the Dust Bowl hit. Now, the Dust Bowl was mainly in the Midwest. But the industries that were most affected were construction, shipping, mining, logging, and agriculture. So an area like Happy Valley, made up mostly of farmers, was hit hard. Most lost their farms to foreclosure. Now remember, the Dust Bowl mainly hit in the Midwest.
Yeah, and the southern, the Southwest too.
Yeah. But
a lot of people
that doesn't mean
displaced.
The farmers who weren't in the Midwest weren't affected by it. And that's the point I'm trying to make here is, even though they weren't directly in the Dust Bowl, a lot of the infrastructure that had been set up to help, it was starting to fall apart. Like I said, it was construction and shipping. Well, there's 2 big industries that could support farming, especially the shipping. If you suddenly can't get your crops to where they need to be, and then on top of it, they got to go across this man-made desert thanks to the Dust Bowl, it's rough. So it affected everybody. It just didn't affect the people in the Midwest. It didn't affect just the people in the West. It affected people on the East Coast. Not as hard, but when you're in a situation like the farmers in Happy Valley where they'd already seen their farms starting to go under due to the Prohibition, and now they got this slapped on top of them. So
absolutely. Just one blow after the other.
So then here comes, and beginning in 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt pushed the New Deal, a series of reforms, job creation, and programs to assist people mostly hurt by the Great Depression. And one of these programs was the Resettlement Administration. It began on May 1st, 1935, and the purpose was to relocate struggling urban and rural families into planned communities.
So what could go wrong?
In Happy Valley, it was decided to buy out the farmers' foreclosed land and turn the purchases into a new wildlife park area to build what would become known as the New York State Wildlife Management Area of Happy Valley. A local paper, the Mexico Independent, dated February 13th, 1936, proudly declared on its front page...
I can quote.
Sure, you go for it. You do the newspapers better.
Quote, Happy Valley Project, Oswego County. Work being carried on by Resettlement Administration, 350 men working to become public hunting and fishing grounds, unquote.
Yeah. The article explains the men chosen for the job of clearing the swamps, planting the trees, and clearing the deadfall were picked from the welfare rolls of the surrounding towns. dated from May 1st to October 31st, 1935. The project was welcome since no other project, such as the WPA, or otherwise known as the Work Progress Administration, had been approved in the area.
Yes, a fun fact. The Works Progress Administration was changed in 1939 to the Work Projects Administration. So there you are.
There you have it. The town, which was named Happy Valley, had not been cursed. There had not been any weird disease. People didn't decide in the middle of the night to get up and leave. They were forced to make that decision due to the economic downturn. And like so many other places in the early 30s, it just disappeared.
Yeah, a little was Happy Valley unincorporated territory, was it? Or did it have a cityhood?
I would have to look that up. I think they were unincorporated. They did have a post office, which seems to be...
a little township, perhaps.
Yeah. It seems to be that's how the historians in this area determine if it's a town or not, is if it had a post office. And Happy Valley did have a post office at one point. It's very interesting. I mean, these poor farmers there got hit with those three things, especially the Prohibition, knocking out their livelihood first. Then you get the Great Depression. There's no bouncing back from that. Top it off, you got the Dust Bowl, and they're not set up to, if they could have foresaw the Dust Bowl coming, they could have switched from hop farming to something else and maybe, stepped in to help, where the Midwest farmers had disappeared. But
it was considered a village.
It was considered. Okay, you found that.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a village, so it did have. It did have a cityhood. They lost their cityhood, and through these economic times and being forced to accept prohibition. First of all,
and I do want to make it clear that not everyone left. When the project started. I mean, a majority of them were either gone by that time, or you had a few families that stayed on until the mid 1930s. There is a video on YouTube. I can't remember what it's titled, but it is like it's like a visit to Happy Valley or investigation of Happy Valley. And they talked to a man on the YouTube video whose family had lived in that area until well into the 1960s. So you can't even say the town disappeared overnight. There was obviously people that hung on to living in the area, but as of I would say since 1970s, nobody lives in that wildlife management area at all.
No, not even any of the groundskeepers or anything like that.
Now, the tales around the cemetery are interesting. There are tales, of course, of the orbs, and there are tales of ghosts and mists. So that's pretty, common for a cemetery, which is well kept. The local historical area and some other groups do.
If you look up any website on the subject of Happy Valley, you'll see photographs of everything that there is to show, and all the remnants of Happy Valley, and the cemetery is rather well kept. And that's but then you've got to take into account who is laid to rest at the graveyard. Because everyone was buried locally.
Yes.
The local graveyard, and you didn't travel 30 miles to go to a funeral like you do nowadays. Nobody's buried in their community, or they choose to be buried in a community that they identify with, or they've got a pre-designated area where they should be laid to rest according to their wills. But people back in the day, if they lived in Murray, Wisconsin, by golly, they got buried, or Exland or Birchwood.
These stories, as great as they are, and great camp tales as they are, kind of fall apart, even if you start thinking about it logically. So, Happy Valley fell apart due to the Great Depression, basically. I mean, it didn't help with Prohibition ahead of time. It makes you wonder, how many other towns have the same story.
Yeah, exactly. How many stories like Happy Valley occurred during that period in time, during the Dust Bowl, when villages were disappearing all over the urban landscape. The rural landscape rather. small cities and towns were disappearing all over the rural landscape. There are a lot of stories, a lot of Happy Valley stories out there. And it's sad.
It is sad.
Well, like those poor kids in the schoolhouse.
Well, some of the ghost stories can also come from, there are a lot of people that go out to Happy Valley. And a lot of these people who use these wildlife refuges really do use them for partying, and they're really disrespectful to anybody else who goes there. I'm thinking about one of the favorite places we would go, Rome Sand Plains. You'd go there quite often, and even though it says no firearms allowed in this one particular place, man, you could stand in one place and pick up enough shotgun shells and casings, to fill a bag. And people, we walked there, came in there one day, and people had put all their beer bottles on a tree. And there must have been like 5 cases of beer bottles on this tree.
Wow.
And that was Rome Sand Plains, one part of Rome Sand Plains. Now just imagine in Happy Valley, you've got people going there who know the stories. They decided to camp out. Yeah,
they had signage around
that
area too, expressly forbidding all the activities
that were going on. And I want to give a shout out to the people in Rome and organized to clean up while we were still living in Rome, to the Rome Sand Plains. You did an amazing job, because we went there a few weeks after, and it was 3,000 times better in that one area. But anyway, let's go back to Happy Valley. But there's an example of how people are kind of feed themselves into the legend. You're going out partying with friends. You go up to Happy Valley. You've already heard the stories. You're out there partying with friends. There's another group of people are out there camping, probably still heard the stories, and you're going to end up freaking each other out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I hear from, I listen to a lot of, cryptid podcasts, and they talk about, I forgot who said the theory, but it's a plausible theory. A lot of people go out and they try to find Bigfoot by banging on trees and do tree knocking. And then, lo and behold, they hear another tree knock. Like, how many of these are other groups of people looking for Bigfoot? They hear the tree knock and they go, oh, that's Bigfoot. Let's see if we can. I'm thinking a lot of the stories of Happy Valley are just that, are people out there partying, or they're out there camping, and they're kind of psyching themselves up by telling themselves these stories, which get wild, like the example, the one we read. And there's another group of people down the road, and you just see their fire, and they're not doing anything but sitting by the fire. Well, they're the creepy guys. Maybe they're ghosts. You can really build yourself up.
I think that's where the stories of bizarre and banal rituals being performed around a fire by robed individuals.
Yeah. It's probably just 2 dudes out there that are fishing and they're staying the night. Having a beer, just sitting there having a beer, and there's a group, down the road, can barely make out who these guys are, and have convinced themselves this place is haunted, and they see the 2 fishermen down there who are just relaxing, probably not moving much because they've been out fishing all day, and they're like, oh, there's the creepy guys that just stare at you, But otherwise, I mean, there are a lot of places people that use it for what it's supposed to be used for hunting and fishing, and go out there in wildlife, and really respect it. I don't want to say everyone who goes out there is a jerk, It is an interesting place to visit. I mean, I know we have not gone out there yet, but if you would like to visit, it's actually in the Happy Valley Wildlife Management Area. So check out the New York Department of Environmental Conservation website for more information. Just do a search on the website for Happy Valley. Now we're adding something. This is our first official podcast, and now we're adding something. Woohoo!
Ghost Trope Game.
Ghost Trope Game. Now what the Ghost Trope Game is going to be, if you're familiar with TV tropes, these are, I guess, shorthands of fiction that you can spot in many types of writing. And same thing holds good for ghost stories and folk tales and urban legends and things of that nature. So we went through the legends, we went through the stories, and we came up with the tropes in this one. As we go on with the podcast, it'd be kind of interesting for people to see if they find other tropes. But the ones we found are
The tales of seeing other people gathered around, possibly doing nefarious deeds.
Yep. Strange rituals.
Yeah,
especially
particularly in the old schoolhouse. In the vicinity of the old schoolhouse, are people in dark or white hoods now
That's that one we call the bedsheet ghost.
So that's one point. That could be anybody in a hoodie.
Yeah, it really.
Honestly.
Another one is strange voices in the woods.
And we put that one down to whispers.
Yeah.
That's an add-on to the list, and that's another point, by the way.
Yeah.
So 2 points already, according to the Ghost Trip game for Happy Valley. Mm-hmm. Let's see, people drinking odd concoctions now.
That was exactly a quote from one of these stories of Happy Valley. Is that the person said he stumbled upon these guys who invited him to sit down and sit at the campfire with him, and they were drinking something that smelled weird, and so he didn't imbibe, which may have been it was probably a smart move, but I don't consider that one so much supernatural.
No, was that from the imbibement, or was that from the man's breath?
Yeah, exactly. Well,
how far were they?
But the way the person told the story is he started thinking that these people that invited him to sit down at the campfire had ulterior motives, and he was thinking more along the lines of supernatural ulterior motives. Only I would be thinking more along the lines of, this is dangerous. It could be anything in that drink. If they're giving me the creeps, I'm getting the heck out of here. And believe me, supernatural is the last thing I'm thinking about. Okay?
Right, exactly.
And then there's also the glowing eyes.
And the feeling of foreboding. Yes,
now, the glowing eyes.
It's not right in these woods.
The glowing eyes. Well, it's a wildlife management area.
Oh, yeah. You might have some, who knows, it might be the rangers out there, taking a piss.
It might be the deer.
Yeah.
Might be the foxes. What does a fox say?
Oh. Yeah, look that one up too, folks. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The sound of foxes.
That would probably explain some of the weird noises you hear in the woods, too.
We've been told that the fox falls within the feline family. Shall we wrap up?
Yeah, I think we should. I'd like to.
Very well.
So that was the history of Happy Valley.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for once again for listening to our Ghastly podcast.
Yes, and the first one is interesting. I will say that. And thank you for anyone who's listened to the Soft podcast earlier.
Yes, thank you very much.
That really helped us, and hopefully this one sounds a lot better.
And how many followers do we have now?
It's below 10.
Below 10? Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to hit 300 by the end of the year. I have high hopes for this.
High hopes.
Let's put this way. I want enough followers that our hosting fee, which is pitiful.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're glad.
It is pitiful.
We're glad for any followers we get. Thank you.
Yes, we are.
For being here.
But I would like enough followers to at least pay for a hosting fee. And if anybody thinks it's an exorbitant amount, put it this way: I've given up 2 cups of coffee a month to pay for this, so it's not a lot. I'm not expecting a lot.
That's okay. You get a cup of coffee here. That's
true. I get a cup of coffee at home. I'm not expecting this to be a podcast with millions of downloads for once. It's a very niche.
Yeah, it is.
It's a very niche thing. You've got to either love upstate New York or you got to love ghost stories from upstate New York. Sure,
or be curious about ghost stories in general and search upstate New York for stories. And thank you for listening. All right, once again to our Ghastly podcast.
Yes, thank you very much.
I've been Matthew Manette.
I'm Mari, and we've had the lovely Honey behind us all day, but she's been quiet. So we're going to have to give our cats co-hosting credits, I think. Yes. So have a good one, folks.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Unearthly Upstate. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and on our webpage. We are on iTunes, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Podcasts. Please like, share, and review, and if you really like us, tell your friends. Unearthly Upstate is an animated Lyre Media production. The show is produced by Matt and Mari Manette, with purring provided by Honey and Lloyd. Research and writing done by Mari Manette. Music is by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. Unless stated otherwise in the episode, the places mentioned in the broadcast have not paid or contacted us for any type of promotion. And please check out our webpage for full credit and sources for the episodes.